World War II didn't just happen overnight. It was the result of years of build-up, secret deals, and strategic moves that many people don't even know about. Here's a shocking fact: over 70 million people died during the war, yet the conflict was triggered by decisions made by just a handful of leaders. How did it all start? Why did the world plunge into such chaos? The truth is, there were countless events leading up to the war that most people overlook. For example, did you know that Germany's military in 1939 was more powerful than the combined forces of Britain and France? Or that the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany secretly divided Poland long before the world even knew about it? In this series, we'll uncover the hidden strategies and untold stories behind World War II's outbreak. From Europe's political powder keg to Japan's surprising role, we'll explore how one invasion set off a global firestorm. Stick with us, and you'll discover the shocking facts that history books often leave out. Ready to uncover the truth? Let's dive in. Chapter 1: The Seeds of Conflict. Europe's powder keg. By the 1920s, Europe was already a ticking time bomb. The aftermath of World War I left a deeply fractured continent, with political instability and economic turmoil brewing under the surface. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, ended the First World War but created resentments that would come back to haunt the world. Germany, in particular, felt humiliated by harsh reparations and territorial losses. This resentment fostered a desire for revenge, setting the stage for the rise of Adolf Hitler. Hitler's vision was clear: he wanted to undo the Treaty of Versailles and expand Germany's borders. His first steps towards this goal were strategic and clever. By capitalizing on the frustrations of ordinary Germans, he gained popularity with promises of restoring national pride. Meanwhile, the League of Nations, created to prevent another world war, was failing to act. European powers like Britain and France struggled with their own economic crises, particularly during the Great Depression, and were too distracted to respond effectively. The economic devastation was key. Unemployment soared, and people were desperate for stability. In this environment, Hitler's Nazi Party promised a strong economy and a return to military greatness. But this wasn't just about economic hardship, it was also about national identity. By tapping into feelings of nationalism, Hitler convinced Germans that they had been wronged and deserved more. The strategy was simple but effective: turn economic despair into a rallying cry for war. Chapter 2: The Silent Architects, Secret Diplomacy and Unseen Deals. While most of the world focused on the visible military buildup, much of the groundwork for World War II was laid behind closed doors. Hitler was a master of secret diplomacy. He wasn't just interested in gaining power in Germany, he wanted to outsmart the rest of Europe. One of his most famous moves was the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact of 1939, a non-aggression treaty between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. This pact was unexpected. The Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, was a communist state, and Hitler's Nazi ideology was completely opposed to communism. Yet, the two nations found common ground. The pact allowed Germany to invade Poland without fearing a Soviet attack. In return, the USSR was promised a share of Poland's land. This secret deal meant that Germany wouldn't be fighting a two-front war, which had been a disastrous strategy in World War I. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was a strategic game-changer. It gave Hitler the freedom to launch his invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, without the immediate threat of Soviet intervention. It also created a false sense of security for Stalin, who had no idea that Hitler would turn on him in just 2 years, launching Operation Barbarossa in 1941. The success of secret diplomacy wasn't just about treaties like the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. It was also about manipulating the perceptions of other world leaders. For example, Hitler cleverly exploited the Munich Agreement of 1938, where British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and French Premier Édouard Daladier agreed to let Hitler annex the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. They believed they were avoiding war, but Hitler used the agreement to gain momentum, ultimately swallowing up more territory. Chapter 3: From Crisis to Aggression, the road to Blitzkrieg. By the time Hitler's armies began marching, they were armed with more than just weapons, they had a powerful strategy. This strategy was called Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. The idea was simple: overwhelm the enemy with rapid, coordinated attacks that would leave little room for resistance. It relied heavily on fast-moving tanks, infantry, and air support, with the goal of shocking and disorienting the opponent before they could respond. Blitzkrieg was first tested in 1939 during Germany's invasion of Poland. Within weeks, the Polish defenses were crushed. German forces used tanks, trucks, and bombers to penetrate deep into Poland. The speed of the attack was unprecedented. Within just 4 weeks, Poland had been defeated, and Hitler's strategy was proven effective. What made this attack particularly brutal was the combined use of tanks, aircraft, and artillery, three forms of warfare that had never been used in such a synchronized way. The invasion of Poland was not just about capturing land, it was about sending a message. The speed and aggression of Blitzkrieg intimidated the entire world. It wasn't just about winning, it was about crushing the will of the enemy and showing the power of Germany's new military doctrine. Hitler knew that surprise and speed were the keys to victory. He also understood the psychological impact of rapid, overwhelming force. This strategy would later be used in other invasions, such as the fall of France in 1940. Blitzkrieg wasn't just an abstract military concept, it was an embodiment of Nazi ideology. Hitler believed in the power of a swift, decisive attack to break the enemy's spirit. The German army trained extensively in this method, and it was led by commanders who understood how to move quickly and adapt on the fly. The success of Blitzkrieg also relied heavily on communication. Radios allowed German commanders to keep in touch with their troops, directing them with precision and speed. If you're finding this deep dive into World War II strategy fascinating, don't forget to subscribe for more insights into the history behind the war. Chapter 4: The Forgotten Front, Asia's role in the global conflict. When we think of the causes of World War II, we often focus on Europe. However, the conflict was also brewing in Asia, where Japan's imperial ambitions were already on the rise. The roots of Asia's involvement in World War II can be traced back to Japan's invasion of Manchuria in 1931. Japan's leaders saw the region as vital for their economic survival, rich in resources like coal and iron. But this was just the beginning. Japan's strategy in Asia was built on expansion. The Kwantung Army in Manchuria started pushing into China, laying the groundwork for future conflicts. In 1937, Japan launched a full-scale invasion of China, triggering the Second Sino-Japanese War. By this time, Japan had already set its eyes on expanding further into Southeast Asia. It was clear that Japan was positioning itself as a dominant military power in the region, but it wasn't just about land, it was about control and resources. The Japanese used brutal tactics, including mass executions and bombings. The rape of Nanking in 1937, where an estimated 300,000 Chinese civilians were killed, shocked the world. This kind of warfare, along with the invasion, made Japan a pariah in the eyes of Western nations. But Japan's leaders were undeterred. They knew that to continue their expansion, they needed to secure vital oil and rubber supplies, which they lacked on their own island. Japan's strategy, however, was not just focused on conquest. They were also playing a dangerous diplomatic game. In the early 1930s, Japan had been part of the Axis powers, joining Germany and Italy in what would become a formidable alliance. The combination of military expansion and diplomatic maneuvering was aimed at challenging the global powers of Europe and the United States. But the true turning point for Japan came with their attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, bringing the United States directly into the war. Enjoying this deep dive? Be sure to subscribe for more fascinating stories on the history that shaped our world. Chapter 5: The Illusion of Peace, the failures of appeasement. As Hitler's power grew, European leaders clung to the hope that they could avoid another war. This led to the policy of appeasement, which aimed to give Hitler what he wanted to avoid conflict. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain was the most prominent advocate of appeasement. He believed that if he allowed Hitler to expand Germany's borders, it would satisfy his ambitions and prevent a war. The most famous example of appeasement occurred in 1938, when Chamberlain, along with French Premier Édouard Daladier, agreed to the Munich Agreement. This allowed Hitler to annex the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia populated by ethnic Germans. Chamberlain returned to Britain declaring he had secured peace for our time, but in reality, this act of compromise only strengthened Hitler's resolve. The strategy backfired because it failed to recognize that Hitler was not interested in peace, only in domination. Appeasement wasn't limited to just the Sudetenland. Britain and France also failed to challenge Hitler's remilitarization of the Rhineland in 1936. This was a direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles, yet neither Britain nor France took military action. This failure to act emboldened Hitler and proved that he could advance without fear of serious consequences. The policy of appeasement failed to see the full picture. It didn't account for Hitler's ideology, which was centered on conquest, not compromise. By allowing Germany to expand, European leaders sent a clear message: they were not willing to fight. As a result, Hitler's forces continued to grow in strength and confidence. The failure of appeasement ultimately paved the way for World War II, making it clear that some dictators are never satisfied with compromises. Chapter 6: The Spark, how one invasion ignited the world. On September 1, 1939, the world finally reached a breaking point. Hitler's forces invaded Poland, and it was this invasion that triggered the official start of World War II. But this wasn't just any invasion, it was a perfect example of Hitler's military genius. The attack on Poland was swift, overwhelming, and brutal, a true test of the Blitzkrieg strategy. Germany had already prepared for war. The Nazis had amassed over 1.5 million soldiers, thousands of tanks, and bombers, all ready for the attack. The Polish military, though brave, was no match for Germany's superior firepower and speed. The Blitzkrieg tactic took full effect. German tanks and troops surged forward, supported by Luftwaffe bombers, which wreaked havoc on Polish cities and military targets. The invasion was a shock to Poland, but it also sent shockwaves throughout Europe. Within days, Britain and France declared war on Germany, signaling the beginning of a global conflict. But the invasion of Poland didn't just highlight Germany's strength, it also exposed the weaknesses of its enemies. Despite having superior numbers, Britain and France were slow to act. They failed to launch a counter-offensive to assist Poland, and by the time they did, Poland had already fallen. Hitler's invasion of Poland marked the end of any hope for peace in Europe. It also demonstrated how quickly and decisively Germany could strike. The Blitzkrieg strategy had been perfected, and its success was a direct result of the preparations Germany had made in the years leading up to the war. Hitler's forces moved with such speed that by September 27, just 3 weeks after the invasion, Warsaw had surrendered. If you've been fascinated by these shocking stories of history, don't forget to subscribe for more insights and untold truths behind World War II.